time to start. Hello everyone. I should say good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, I assume it's also good evening. So I would like first to thank you for attending this webinar. Yeah, and I hope that you'll enjoy it. Also, just some quick technical question. I hope that you can hear me well. No, I see somebody saying, is the microphone on? Yes, and I hope it's everybody's can hear me well. So just starting with some technical details. So if you have any question during the presentation and during the discussion, you can submit your question in the. There is a Q&A tabs in the bottom of your screen. So this is where you can write your question, and then we will answer them during the discussion session. Also for you to know, the recorded session version of this webinar will be available at the World Potato Congress website, which is potatocongress.org, that you can see here on the screen. Okay, so these are some technical details that we wanted to mention before starting the presentation. I also let me see now. Yeah, also wanted to let you know that the next World Potato Congress will be organized in 2024 in June, and that's going to be in Adelaide, Australia. So there is still some time to go until 2014, but 2024, sorry, but you can already mark it in your calendar. More information will come through the World Potato Congress newsletter and the website. I would like also to thank our sustaining partners. You can see you have quite many, but we would like to have more. Just sustaining partners who are supporting the activities of the World Potato Congress. Activities such as this webinar, the Congress that is organized every year, and some other activities that the World Potato Congress is implementing. So thank you to the sustaining partners who allowed us to have this type of interaction with you. So today's webinar will focus on the potato ranches of Canary Islands. I was there recently, a few years ago, and I was really impressed to see those potatoes, Landraces, that were descending from potato that were introduced for more than 400 years ago and still cultivated today. So I became very, very interested by this potato, even enthusiastic about this diversity. And this is why with Domingo Rios, we decided to prepare this presentation to inform you about the Landraces, their history, their diversity, and their importance in the origin of the potato in Europe. So I am André Devaux, Scientist Emeritus of the International Potato Center, and Domingo Rios is the director of the center, let's say it in English, the Center of Conservation of Biodiversity, of Agriculture Biodiversity of Tenerife, which is part of the Cabildo Insular of Tenerife. So we have been working, the two of us, on this presentation. So I'm starting with the presentation in English, and when we finish the discussion about the presentation in English, Domingo will continue with the same presentation in Spanish. About the conference will be organized around 5 main sections. The first one is about an introduction about first the Canary Islands, and also the potato Landraces of the Canary Islands. Then I will present briefly the origin and the domestication of the cultivated potatoes. It will be followed by the history of the potato Landraces in the Canary Islands. And the most important section will be on the morphological, taxonomic, and molecular studies of the diversity of the Canary potatoes. And then we'll end up with some conclusions. So first, let's locate the Canary Islands. I assume not everybody know where they are located. So you see they are located in the, you can see them here on the screen. I hope you can see my pointer. They are in the Atlantic Ocean. They are at the approximately 28 degree in the northern latitude, near to the Tropic of Cancer. It's at the level of Morocco and the Sahara, which is interesting to mention is that this northern latitude is similar to the southern latitude of the Tropic of Capricorn in northern Argentina, that represent the southern limit of native Andean potatoes in South America. So I think this point, this detail is important, because we will come back to it and during the presentation. But the similarity between the latitude of the Canary Islands and the latitude, the southern latitude of the northern part of Argentina, where some native potatoes, Andean native potatoes, can be grown and can still be found. In the Canary Islands, around today, there are still around 50 potato landraces with the unique characteristic that were, say, introduced centuries ago, have been maintained, and they are still cultivated by farmers today. So it is quite impressive. This year, in 2022, I had the opportunity to attend the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the first written reference about the potato cultivation in Canary Island. I insist about the written reference because that has been, it comes from José de Viera y Clavijo in 1886, who naturalist who wrote, Juan Bautista de Castro brought the first potatoes from Peru in 1622. This gentleman had them planted in his land in Ico del Alto, from where they've spread throughout the Canary Islands. So this is the first reference of the cultivation of potato in the Canary Islands, but some other, I think, information, and there was also some speculation, looking at the days potato were circulating, that indicate that potato could have been already cultivated earlier than that. But this is the first written reference about the cultivation in Tenerife. So it's, you see, it's today is 400 years ago, and we believe that potatoes were introduced before that. I like the citation that says that the Andes end in the Canary Islands. I heard about that when I was in the Canary Islands. It's quite interesting, and it illustrates very well the role of the Canary Islands in as an intercontinental meeting point, between Americas and continental Europe. And this connection between the Americas and Europe is really reflected to the potato landraces. And you can see on the picture already the diversity of those potatoes on the top, and pictures on the top, and you see that they're really, you can see the diversity, and also they look like really some potatoes that you can find in the Andes. So those potatoes, they have an historical value. And also for the Canary Island, they are an heritage treasure, both cultural and gastronomic, resulting from the fusion of two different continents, Europe and Americas. Those potatoes could spread relatively quickly, and we'll see it later in the Canary Island, because of the soil, the orography, and you see in the Canary Islands, those who knows it, there are some hilly areas that correspond, not exactly the same, but similar to the Andes, and the optimal climate that had an impactful effect on the to the multiplication and the spread of these the cultivation of those potatoes in the islands. So the study of the potato landraces of the Canary Islands is important to understand the origin of the European potatoes, and this is something we're going to discuss in this presentation. Let's look first at the map. which shows the potato journey from its home in South America to the rest of the world. So if you look here, you can see that the first shipment of potatoes to Europe came from the Andes, from Peru, and that was around 1565. Again, there are some different versions, could have been a bit earlier, but that the date that is officially mentioned. And more than 20 years later, the first register of potato from Chile was also indicated, and also those potatoes went also to Europe. It is important to know that at that time, for the vessels, the boats, had to reach a very long way, and the way to reach Europe was to pass by the Canary Island. Canary Island was really a stopover required for those vessels. And then from the Canary Island, the potatoes moved into Spain, Europe, and to the rest of the world. So the argument about the origin of the European potatoes is based on the identity of these ancient potatoes, Landraces, as Andean or Chilean, you know, and that is reflected in the question below. What was the first group of cultivars imported from the Americas and developed in Europe that later spread through all the world, you know? And this is, in this presentation, we will contribute to respond to this question. So let's move to the second section about the origin and domestication of the cultivated potato, Solanum tuberosum. The first potatoes have their origin in the mountain range of the Andes, and specifically in the south of Peru and in the north of Bolivia. And it is known that the Andes are the birthplace of the potato, where the crop originated about 10,000 years ago. You should know that the Andean region is really an area where you find the center of origin of many edible plants today. And Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia concentrate 25% of the planet diversity, you know, so so it shows that the importance in potato were part of this diversity. I like the citation from Salaman, who says in the 19th century, the early history of the potato was set in a scene dominated by the mysterious grandeur of the Andes, which is well reflected by this picture, which was taken in the top of the Andes in Peru. And you can see it's very impressive, and potatoes there can be grown up to an altitude of more than 4,000 meters, 4,500 meters, you know, so it's quite impressive. The ancestor of the cultivated potato were the wild species, the wild potatoes. And there are more than 100 species of wild potatoes, and they present a great diversity. As you can see on the picture on the left, you can see difference of tubers, flowers, leaves, fruits, and also the type of plant, you know. And those wild species have been disseminated through the centuries, and you can see that they got adapted to different habitats. On the top left, you can see those potatoes, those wild species were found in the dry forest in Mexico. They were also found in the Puna of Venezuela. They were found in the tropical humid highlands of Peru and Bolivia, and you can find that they were found also on the beach on the coast of Chile. It's interesting to mention that the Charles Darwin, the naturalist exploring South American coast in the 19th century, noted in his diary, and because you know he was observing the diversity in those in the coast of the South America, he noted that it is very remarkable the fact that the same plant can be found both in dry areas of Chile, and we can see the picture here, and in the humid and rainy forest of Peru and Bolivia. So that shows the adaptability of the potatoes that can be found in different environments. So through the centuries, you know, and because of dissemination, crossbreeding, the human selection brought those native potatoes to more than 4,000 native potato varieties in the Andes. And today, those potatoes are still cultivated in the Andes. I've been living and working there, and it is true that it is very common to find farmers growing those potatoes for their own consumption, also for the market. And during the last 20 years, those potatoes have also been promoted in urban market and to become a type of delicacy, gourmet potatoes. So those native potatoes, and you can see, and those 4,000 native potatoes, most of them are from the subspecies Solanum tuberosum indigena. And that brings me to the next slides, where it is important to mention that Solanum tuberosum is divided in two subspecies. First, we have Solanum tuberosum subspecies indigena. It is native of the Andes and is distributed from Venezuela to Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, and to the northern part of Argentina. So as I was saying before, when we're talking about the latitude, native potatoes and Andean native potatoes can be found in the northern part of Argentina. The other subspecies is Solanum tuberosum, subspecies tuberosum. It is native of Chiloé, here at the south of Chile, and today this subspecies is widely cultivated around the world, in the north of North America, Asia, Europe, and Africa, and it is predominant in the northern latitude because it is well adapted to long days and the tubers are highly homogeneous, while the Solanum tuberosum indigena are more adapted to short days, and you have seen the diversity in the type of tubers. So before moving to the next section, I wanted to come back to the map that I showed you earlier, again insisting on the transfer of potatoes from America to Europe in the 16th century. So the first potatoes were brought from Peru to the Andes, passing through Canary Islands, as we have said, and later on, more than 20 years later, they were brought from Chile, Chiloé, to also to the Canary Island before moving into Europe. And so that brings us to the next session about the Canary Islands, which are the point of arrival of the potato to Europe. And that can be understood because potato were a commodity subject to trade, which would explain the early passage to the Canary Islands, because at that time, everything that was brought or taken from America entered and left from the Canary Islands. So they were a transit, I would say, point, harbor, where the conquistadores at that time had to pass before going into Spain or other countries, Portugal. So the oldest reference of the potato is from 1567 by a notary who published the shipment of merchandise to Belgium, and it was saying, and likewise, I received 3 medium barrels that you say have potatoes and oranges and green lemons. So this is the first official reference. But again, I was telling you there are some other speculation that the potato could have been introduced earlier, like in the 1560. So because of we have seen that the first potatoes were brought from the Andes, from Peru, it is anticipated that the first introduction could be belonging to the Solanum subspecies indigena, both from the description that were made and also from the morphological and molecular studies that were implemented later on. But the first introduction, it's almost sure, were from were of the subspecies Solanum indigena. Let me see now why it doesn't move. Yeah, okay. So now I'm going to go briefly to the history of the potato in the Canary Islands. So the first, the Pizarro, if we start on the top, Pizarro discovered Peru in 1532. The potato was first seen by European explorer in the Andes in 1552. And 1567, as we just mentioned, the potato was first documented from the Canary Islands for a shipment going to Belgium. But again, I'm repeating that there are also some other authors are indicating that potatoes could have been introduced earlier, like in 1562. In 1573, the potato, 1573 was the first potato report in continental Europe that was, sorry, that was in Spain. And then in 1622, as we said, we have the first written record about the cultivation of the potato in Tenerife and planted by Juan Bautista de Castro. In 1776, potatoes were documented as the second most important crop for the Canary Islands after wine grapes. And I think it is quite interesting to see that information, because it seems that the potatoes have developed and were grown much faster in the Canary Island as compared to Europe, because in Europe it took some time before potatoes would be accepted. They were first seen as a type of a botanical curiosity, and also there were stories that indicating that potato was a food with diabolical properties, which reduce its consumption and is interest by people. So. And another explanation also, I would say, is that as the first introduction were of the subspecies Solanum indigena, they adapted better to the Canary Island because of the short days condition in the Canary Island versus the long day conditions in Europe. So it might have been more difficult at the beginning for to grow the native potatoes coming from the Andes in continental Europe because of this day length difference. In 1800, we have the first record of seed potato tuber stock for planting imported from Europe, Holland to the Canary Islands. So the potatoes were coming back, and we can imagine at that time we had the Solanum tuberosum, species tuberosum brought to the Canary Island. In 1868, Alvarez Rixo described 20 cultivars of the Canary Island potatoes, and it is interesting to mention that most of their names are still in use today in the Canary Island. So today there is around 50 ancient varieties that are still maintained and cultivated in the island. Don't know why. Yeah, okay. It's interesting. This picture shows you the diversity of those potatoes, different colors, different shapes, and it reflects, the originality, the characteristics that are similar to the American potato from the Americas. So the Canary Islands are, I think, a natural laboratory for potatoes introduced 400 years ago. And we say that because, since their introduction, those potatoes have been multiplied and cultivated by farmers, and keep maintaining their diversity as compared to the potatoes that were introduced to continental Europe, where because of the selection mainly because of the selection for getting them adapted to the local condition, they were looking for better productivity. So at the end, they got a crop in Europe. They got a crop which was much more uniform, and they lost a bit this diversity that was maintained in the Canary Island. And so that's why today these ancient potatoes are still cultivated and multiplied by farmers. They are usually cultivated and multiplied in small plots. As you can see here, these farmers using animal traction, because we'll see another picture that they are sometimes cultivated in terraces, and so that allows to maintain that allowed to maintain this biodiversity in the island. Today there are between 600 and 700 hectares cultivated with ancient potatoes at an altitude between 600 and 1,200 meters. The total potato growing area in the island is around 4,500 hectares. So the other the other land, and is used for more commercial varieties, mainly I assume Solanum tuberosum, and that can be grown also at a lower altitude. So those ancient potatoes are grown mostly between January and July, and more in the hilly areas, and they are produced mainly for the local market. This picture shows you the potato agro-system in the Canary Islands. So you can see here on the back of the screen the Teide volcano, and then below you see at an altitude of around 1,200 up to 1,500 meters, you can see the terraces where the mainly potato is grown, and some other crops. And you can see here on the bottom on the right, the farmers using animal traction. Those plots are relatively small, and farmers have small areas of around half an hectare of land, on those terraces. In 2012, the protected denomination of origin of the ancient potatoes of the Canary Island was approved by the European Union, So that has contributed to policies promoting those potatoes, both with the producers and supporting the producers in cultivating these potatoes, and also policies promoting the crop with the consumer, through gastronomic fair and other events, just to promote them and let them better known, and to also promote the consumption of these potatoes. So 2012 was an important year, recognizing the protected denomination of origin of these ancient potato of Canary Islands. So continuing with the concept that the Canary Islands is a natural laboratory for potatoes introduced many years ago, you can see, if you look at the picture on the left, you could imagine that picture was taken in Peru or in Bolivia. The shape and the color of those tubers, could make you think of Andean potatoes. I took that picture myself in Tenerife, so I'm sure that was taken in Tenerife. And the morphology of the ancient potatoes suggests that they descend from the first tubers that arrived from the Andes, and I think that was the evidence. But this does not justify the only origin of the Andes as the origin of the Andes as the potato ancestor, if you can say, of the Canary potato, because there are also cultivars introduced from Chiloé of the Solanum tuberosum. So we will analyze this the specificity of these two species in the next section of the presentation, which is about the morphological, taxonomic, and molecular studies of the diversity of Canarian potatoes. So since the 18th century, ancient potato began to be classified, and at that time it was mainly based on the agronomic and morphological data. More in recent studies then have been more, I would say, detailed and more, I would say, performant, combining historical, agronomical, morphological, taxonomical, and molecular data to allow to obtain better identification and taxonomic classification of these ancient potatoes. So the first morphological studies and taxonomy studies, when there was already initial studies at the end of the 18th century, where morphological and agronomic differences were appreciated in the cultivar, classifying them by the harvest season. That was the first classification. But more recently, the taxonomic study by Subeldia confirmed the presence of 7 cultivars of the subspecies Andigena, 2 cultivars of the subspecies tuberosum, and a triploid cultivar of the species Solanum mammaliferum, that's known, called today Solanum chocha, which is known, and Negra yema de huevos is the potato that you can see here. It is you can see the yellow flesh. It's a very tasty potato and used in different dishes. Later on, there was an ethnobotanical studies by Marrero in let me see, in 1992, and 2007 that established the classification of the cultivar in the Canary Island, and then they identify 4 groups. The first group that you can see tubers here in the first picture. The first group represented autochthonous cultivars of the Indigena group derived from the first one arrived in the Canary Island from the mid-16th century. So this group were really the Indigena group that kept their characteristics since more than 400 years ago. The second group here in the picture 2, where they grouped the current South American cultivar of the Indigena group, but they were introduced more recently 5 or 6 decades ago from Venezuela and Colombia. The third group included the autochthonous cultivars of the tuberosum group, arrived for Chiloé. This is the picture you have here, the 3A, and also from Europe later in the 18th and 19th centuries. Okay, so they were already able to differentiate the different subspecies and the group in those subspecies. And then there was a 4th group that were representing the European commercial cultivar that were introduced later on from the tuberosum group that came from England, Holland, and Ireland. Then there was a study carried out by Rios through numerical taxonomy, and they identify clearly 3 main groups. So first, the potatoes with characters of Solanum tuberosum, and this is what we find here. You see on the top on the left, so where you can see they are together. Then there is an intermediate group formed by potatoes introduced from Venezuela, and probably some hybrids and a variety Colorada de Baga, and this is the one that you can see here in pink. And then a group made of the cultivar of Solanum indigena. These are all those potatoes who are on the right. So that was obtained through numerical taxonomy. Then more recently in 2007, there was an analysis studies using molecular techniques. It was the first study of phylogenetic approximation, comparing the Canarian potatoes with South American cultivars of different species and subspecies, and that study followed the previous one that already been implemented by Barandella in 2006. So what they were doing, they brought they took some potatoes that are still the Indigena group that are cultivated, Indigena and other subspecies cultivated in South America, and compare them to the Canarian potato. And the result obtained is consistent with the morphological group obtained with Rios in 2002. But the study shows that the Canarian entries of Solanum indigena are forming a cluster which is independent of the entries of South American origin of the same subspecies. So there were we could say two subgroups in Solanum, the subspecies indigena, the cluster of the Canarian entries, the Canarian introduction that were introduced 400 years ago, and those entries that were not introduction, but they were taken in South America. So they wanted to compare the two groups, and they found that there was a difference. So this finding would indicate a certain evolution of the Canarian cultivar that distinguished them from the original Andean ones, and the possibility that Canarian island as a secondary center of diversity for the potato. And on the picture here, we can see that the dendrogram that they obtained. So on the top, you have the the Chilean cluster with the Solanum tuberosum, and here then you have the cluster of the Andean. We have the Andean cluster, but we can see that here on the top we have the cultivars that the autochthonous of Canarian Islands, and then here below we have the group of cultivars that were from South America that were used for the analysis. So all those studies are helping us to understand the evolution of the diversity of the potatoes in the Canary Islands. So let's come to the last section, to the conclusion. So the first historical data that of the presence of the potato Canary Islands, as we say, between 1560 and 1567, are prior to the first report of potato in continental Europe that was mentioned in 1573. So most probably this first introduction will belong to the subspecies Solanum indigena, but as we have seen, later analysis indicate that cultivars introduced in parallel from the Andes and Chiloé were present in the Canary Island. So that's first conclusion. Second conclusion, so the later study, especially the using molecular techniques, seems to indicate that the Canary Island are a secondary center of diversity for the potato because of the evolution of these introduction cultivars centuries ago. And this is because the intervention, the selection by farmers for century, the probable use of sexual seed for multiplication have originated a diversity different from the one from those introduction of the center of origin in America. So although farmers have been able to continue to grow this potato, they have influenced their characteristic by selection, by using sexual seed, and but they have been able to maintain the diversity of those potatoes, but they're a bit different from the original introduction. And it is important also, on conclusion, looking at those results, it's important to support the conservation in situ, which means in farmers' field, and ex situ, and the researchation in laboratory of these typical varieties of Tenerife as a differentiated product which is in the market, that is still available in the market, and which is give an important added value for in the benefit of the producers. And I think the denomination of origin of the ancient potatoes are contributing, to support the conservation of these potatoes and helping farmers to continue to grow them, and the research station to continue to progress in analyzing to maintain those potatoes, but also to continue the study about the diversity. The Canary potatoes, and so we can conclude that the Canary potatoes are a combination of potatoes of Andean and Chiloé nature, but with different features. It is likely that an early introduction of the potatoes in the Canary Islands are from the Andes, but later we had potatoes coming from Chile, but the Chilean introduction, as already mentioned, were better adapted to long days. So it means that they adapted faster and much better in continental Europe, where they became the dominant germplasm source for early European varieties. So we could have a conclusion saying that the European potato varieties originated mainly from a Chilean introduction. To the relationship between biodiversity of Andean and Canary potatoes, we must add the similarity between customs linked to potato cultivation that exists on the Canary Island. And this picture shows that similarity in the cultivation in comparing agriculture practice in the Andes on the left and in the Canary Islands on the right. The picture on the left was taken in Peru, and the right one in Tenerife, and it also, I think, make us come back to the citation I was mentioning, that the Andes and in Canary Islands. Another point of similarity that I would like to mention to conclude is the gastronomy that linked to those native potatoes in both continents, in the Andes, as I would say, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia, and also in the Canary Island, where those ancient potatoes are one of the emblematic food of the Canary Island. They are used in many typical dishes. I've tasted them. You can imagine when I was there, and it was a unique experience. Then that brings me to a final reflection. Eating one of these potatoes is like eating a piece of history. Okay, with that, I would like to thank you. I hope that this presentation have contributed to inform you about the the ancient potato, the potato Landraces of the Canary Islands. And now we are going to move into the discussion section. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay, and start looking at the question. So there is a question here that somebody is asking. He said, "Thank you for the presentation. Are these native varieties kept in tissue culture? Are they virus-free and multiplied for farmer use?" Okay, so I can answer part of this question, and my colleague Domingo Rios, who is also with us at the moment, can complement. Because Domingo will continue with the presentation in Spanish, but I have asked him to be there to help me for the questions. So I think, yes, those varieties are kept in tissue culture in the Canary Islands. So I know because I visited the laboratory that was also run by Domingo. And so there is some seed available for free material to be multiplied for farmer use. I was talking with Domingo when I was there is that not all those varieties have been included in the potato germplasm that is maintained by the International Potato Center. That's something that eventually should duplicate, could be sent to the International Potato Center. Domingo, do you have anything to comment about that point?
No, André, thank you. But only in the potato landrace.
We don't hear you, Domingo.
André.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I had to put my earphones. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
No, only in the canary potatoes, in the landrace canary potatoes, there are a lot of virus because the seed, the growers, the agriculture, every year plant the seed from the landraces, know the special seed and they grow the seeds. But in this landrace there are a lot of virus and there are a lot of different diseases.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Domingo. And eventually that brings me to another point, which I think is interesting. It would be interesting to study. If we consider that those potatoes were introduced many centuries ago, and they've been maintained in the field for so many years, I would assume that many of those varieties, I would say, are resilient, or we could say are rustic. So they are contaminated by virus. Maybe I know that in the Canary Island also you have nematodes. So those potatoes present some tolerance to those problems. There is also some late blight is also present in the Canary Island. And so that's an element that would be interesting to study when we talk about robust potato varieties. That could be a research question to be analyzed. And it brings me to another question where people were asking me if there was bacterial wilt in the field in the Canary Island, and what is the crop rotation followed for these ancient potatoes. Domingo, I'm going to call on you because again, I'm not able to answer to that question about bacterial wilt. Maybe while Domingo is, because I don't see him reacting at the moment, but he can come back, or maybe he's coming. So about the rotation and the bacterial wilt.
Okay, I looked the question.
So the question is bacterial wilt not present in their field? Is a long crop rotation followed? Yeah.
No, but the bacterial wilt is not present in the Canary Island potatoes. not in the field, Canary Island. But other bacterial disease is possible, but bacteria will know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then there is maybe Domingo, I think you can stay on, okay, because there is another question about has anyone compared the nutritional profile of the indigenous landraces to the common tuberosum varieties grown in most of Europe? What about the nutrition characteristic as compared to the common varieties grown in Europe? Was there any study about it?
Yes. There are. I think there are 4 or 5 papers in which we study the nutrition of the Canary landrace and compare it with other potatoes. For example, of commercial variety Cara and red Cara. I don't remember the paper, but there are 4 or 5 papers, and the nutrition of these varieties is very very high, because have a lot of agreed phenolic compound, there are other special properties.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then
André,
there is another question about that. Okay, how those potatoes in the Canary Island compare with the Andean one in terms of yield and resistance to disease? We answered partially to that question. Well, it's difficult to I don't know if there was any. It's difficult to compare the yield capacity with the Andean potatoes. I don't know, because the average yield of these Andean potatoes, Domingo, which level is it? Around 10 tons per hectare, or?
Yes, 10 tons per hectare. For example, Negra Yemahuevo is a triploid, is a Soran Chaucha, is between 5 tons, 10 tons per hectare. And the other varieties, the Andean varieties, between 10 tons, 15 tons. This is the maximum harvest, no?
Yeah. So we could say that the situation is quite similar to the Andean potatoes grown today in the Andes. Yeah, grow closely. Yeah. Then there was a question. Yeah, because in the presentation I was mentioning the evolution of these the indigenous group, that was we could identify through the molecular analysis technique. And then there is a question who is asking, there is still varieties that have not gone through crossbreeding. I don't know if you have any information about that. And they are still authentical, if you could say. Do you have any? If you want to look at it, I can maybe move to the. Yeah, there is a question while you are looking at the previous one. Are all these cultivars commercialized in the Canary Island? Yes, they are. The main market is the Canary Island, and their export has been limited recently because because of the problem of an insect, Thesia soranivora, so that doesn't allow the export of these potatoes at the moment to the peninsula, to the continent, no. And I don't know if you want to come back to the question about crossbreeding. Should I repeat it? Has there been no crossbreeding between the different varieties that they have there, Seems to be a difficult question, so I will go to the next one that I, okay, did some of them. So did some potato germplasm have a very high macronutrition? I think some of them, yes, but I think this is type of studies that still need, as Domingo said, that still need to be run and in more details as far as I know. And then Domingo, have you seen the question of crossbreeding?
No, because only I think using in the Naker the Basket Institute in Europe, in Spain, in El País Vasco, cross some varieties, only some varieties. I think with the group of Bonitas is a group indigenous in Canary Island. I don't know if use of other accession, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. But some people are asking, can we get the list of Landraces with characteristics from the Canary Islands? I assume yes, no, because the list of the Landraces exists, and I think there are several publications about that. So they should, I would say, they could contact you, no, to get this information if they wish, no. Yeah. Then yeah, and then there's some specific question about resistance. Is there information about the PVP resistant late blight nematode resistance in Canary Island potatoes based on the molecular marker or phenotypic screening?
Andrés, sorry, but there are papers of potato research about the resistance of these potatoes from nematodes and phytophthora.
Yeah, and so yes, because you told me that has been published relatively recently in Potato Research, no? So that can be found. And again, if somebody is interested specifically, could contact Domingo to get a copy of those papers. So there was a question indicating, would some of these ancient cultivars offer potential for future breeding for disease-resistant such as Phytophthora in modern cultivars? I think this is the point you mentioned before about the collaboration with Naker, no?
Yeah.
So, and that's still, I think that would have to be developed. I think this issue about the agronomic characteristics and also the resistance to pests and disease, I think would be interesting to analyze, because again, I'm coming back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's quite impressive to see that potatoes that were introduced centuries ago are still able to produce. So there must be some tolerance to most of the insect and diseases. Could explain why their yield is not so high, but on the other side, they're quite resilient and they're able to continue to produce under those conditions. Yeah. So we have again a question about the use of this variety for the breeding program. So I think that's as Domingo mentioned, this is a point that been started to study with colleagues in Spain, but still, I think there's still a lot of work to be done on that side. And then there is a question asking if in the Canary Island you have any a formal seed production program to supply good quality seed to farmers. Domingo, did you get it?
André, there are two systems of seed production in Canary Island of these Landraces. The most important is the production of farmer. Year to year, the farmer produce our seeds and change the seeds from different fields, different heights, and different orientations, south to north and north to south. But between 15 years ago, the Cultesa is the public business, but the first contribution of this Cultesa, this business or empresa is that the Cultesa produce these Landraces in vitro and clean of virus these varieties. No? I think, but I think only the 10%, 15% of the seed are clean, no? But the rest is the seed of the grower, of the farmer. No?
Yeah. Okay. So what you say is that normally farmers, year after year, they use their own seed, and a very small amount of seed is renewed through a formal seed production program. Okay. Then there's still some question about resistance to disease like Fusarium, dry rot, and Pectobacterium. Again, as we said before, I think there might be some tolerance of these varieties if they've been able to survive for so many years, but I don't think any research has been implemented on those aspects. Somebody is asking about the PVY resistance. Again, anything specific about PVY resistance, Domingo?
No. I don't know, but it's possible in some varieties and some accession of these varieties, but I don't know. Yeah.
And then there is a question that how farmers in the Canary Islands are controlling lead blight. Are they using chemicals, or do they control lead blight?
Chemical, because it's the first method, no, in Canary Islands, no. But some growers are organic farmers. Some farmers are organic farmers, but the rest is a chemical farmer. No?
Yeah, because it's interesting that you are talking about organic farming, because there was a question about organic production, and it's interesting to see that some farmers are using the organic production system. Do you have an idea about what is the percentage of those unseen potatoes that are under organic production conditions? Is it a minority? Is it 50%? I don't know.
No, I think it's a little bit percent, about 10%, but it's a few farmers.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe we have a last question, because we are coming to the end, to the hour. Well, there is a question which I think has been important in other crop, but I don't know if it applies to potatoes. Somebody is asking me, because those potatoes have been contaminated by virus, and is there any effect of the presence of viruses that on the effect of the viruses on the flavor? As somebody compare virus-free Canary potatoes with those replanted by farmers? It's an interesting question, but
yes, we compare the virus-free Canary potatoes with effect of virus 15 or 20 years ago, no? I don't remember, but I think no affect the flavor. I think, but I don't remember, because there are a difference between the rendiments, no? Because for example, the potatoes virus-free, the seed potatoes virus-free, the harvest is nearly 20-25, nearly 30 tons.
Yeah.
But the normal potatoes, the potatoes Landraces with virus produce 10 tons, 12 tons. There are a big difference between the harvest between free virus seed and virus with the seed well with virus. No?
Okay, thank you. I think with that answer, and thank you, Domingo, to help me responding to those questions. I think we came to the end of the session, the first session of this webinar in English, and now we are going to continue with the session in Spanish that will be managed by Domingo. So thank you very much to those who attended the first presentation in English, and now we'll move to the presentation in Spanish that will be by Domingo. Thank you very much.